The evening began like so many others, painfully polite, glossy with false warmth. Ethan's mother had set the table with her usual obsessive flair. Crystal glasses sparkled beneath the dim chandelier. Her roast was overcooked as always, but she served it like royalty passing down a crown. Her eyes never quite met mine. They hadn't for years. I wore the navy blue dress Ethan once said made me look graceful, not loud. I'd stopped wearing perfume around his mother after she complained it irritated her migraines. Tonight, I had pinned my hair the way she liked, neat, subdued, almost invisible. The meal was bland, the conversation blander, but the tension, it hummed just beneath the tablecloth like a live wire. Then came the whisper. It was nothing more than a leaning motion, a gentle touch on her son's wrist, and a soft murmur. I couldn't hear the words. I didn't have to, because Ethan changed. One blink, and his gaze turned glassy, hard. The hand that had been resting near mine curled into a slow fist. When he looked at me again, it wasn't as a husband looks at his wife, it was how a man might stare at a trespasser on his land. He stood. Slowly, all eyes turned, and then he said it. "You're a manipulative gold digger, Claire. And I'm done pretending you aren't." I didn't breathe. And a one did. Silverware halted midair. His sister gasped. His father lowered his wine glass, confused. But his mother, she smiled. Just barely, like a chess player watching the final move unfold. I felt my face flush hot, my hands shaking under the table. "Excuse me," I finally managed, but it came out a whisper, paper thin. "You heard me," he said. "We've all been blind, but not anymore." I stood up, not knowing where I would go, just that I couldn't stay seated like a scolded child. And that's when it happened. My purse slipped from the edge of my chair. Everything spilled out: keys, lip balm, tissues. And the envelope, that manila envelope. It landed face up. The top flap fluttered open like the wings of some paper bird of truth, and out came a stack of documents, old medical bills, bank receipts, and a letter, folded neatly. The one from his father, the one he never knew I had. The room shifted. His mother's eyes snapped to the letter. Her smile faltered. Ethan didn't move. Neither did I. I bent down slowly, deliberately, and picked up each item, my fingers cold and deliberate, like I was gathering broken glass. I didn't speak. I didn't cry. I simply stood, slid the envelope back into my purse, and said with perfect calm, "Thank you for dinner." Then I walked out the front door. The wind outside was cooler than I remembered. Crisp, honest. I didn't look back. When I first met Ethan, I thought he was a lighthouse in my otherwise steady, uneventful life. He wasn't loud or dramatic. No grand gestures. Just a steady, reassuring presence, like warm coffee on a cold morning. The kind of man who held the door without thinking about it, who made eye contact when he spoke, who laughed softly like he meant it. We met at a conference in Denver. I was giving a talk on nonprofit finance. He was in tech, in a sharp navy suit and 2 polished shoes, asking questions that showed he was listening. 3 months later, I had left my job, packed up my apartment in Portland, and moved to Austin to be with him. It felt brave at the time, like the kind of leap women in novels take for love, for a new chapter. And when we found the house, a little fixer-upper with ivy strangling the porch railings and stained glass windows begging for light, I saw a life. "Ours," Ethan said. "It's perfect." I agreed. We spent weekends at flea markets picking out furniture. I painted the living room walls a soft sage green and lined the kitchen shelves with cobalt blue jars I'd collected since college. I scrubbed floors until my hands cracked, planted jasmine vines by the porch, and built a spice rack from reclaimed wood. I poured every cent of my savings into that home. Into us. The deed was in his name. He said it was just easier that way since he had better credit. I signed where he asked. I didn't ask questions. His mother hated the house, said it was quaint, like a polite insult wrapped in lace. From the beginning, she didn't like me. I could feel it in the way she smiled too tightly, her compliments always slightly curved with judgment. "She's a little ambitious, isn't she?" she said once, sipping wine and side-eyeing my career. "Women these days seem to forget their place." I laughed it off. So did Ethan. But I noticed he never defended me. Not really. He'd change the subject or chuckle nervously, like agreeing in disguise. It was subtle at first, the erasures. He took over decorating the office and never asked for my input. When I suggested converting the attic into a studio, he brushed it off, too expensive. Though I offered to pay for it myself, I started to feel like a guest in the home I was helping build. Still, I clung to optimism, told myself love was compromise, told myself we were solid, that this was just the long game of marriage. But there were cracks, small ones. He kept finances to himself, said joint accounts were a trap and that we should each manage our own. I believed him. When I got a raise at the nonprofit I was consulting for, he said, "Don't let that go to your head, babe. We still rely mostly on my income." I laughed. Because what else do you do when the person you love shrinks you an inch at a time? My friends saw it before I did. "You're dimmer around him," my best friend Maddie once said. "You used to light up when you talked about your work." I remember brushing her off. "It's just a phase. We're figuring things out." She nodded, but her eyes said, "You're lying to yourself." Still, I stayed. I believed in building, in loyalty, in not giving up just because things got hard. But I started to lose pieces of myself. I stopped wearing red. Ethan said it was too loud. I gave up my morning yoga. He needed the car for his meetings. I stopped correcting his mother when she called me that woman instead of Claire. The jasmine vines I planted bloomed once and then died. I never replaced them. One night, I found an old photo of myself barefoot on a beach in a sundress, laughing with my arms spread wide. I didn't recognize her. It hit me like a sharp breath. I was becoming invisible in my own life. I wasn't a partner. I was a placeholder, a supportive role in the story of a man and his ambitions. And still, I stayed. Because I thought love was sacrifice. Because I thought one day he'd see me. Because I had already given so much, and it felt impossible to start over. Looking back, I realize I wasn't building a life. I was being erased delicately, consistently, until the only trace of me left was in receipts, paint swatches, and a hidden stack of thank you notes from his father. And even those I kept in an envelope, tucked away like contraband. I used to think silence was gentle, a meadow at dawn, dew settling on petals that have not yet decided which way to turn. But the silence that settled between Ethan and me after that dinner was nothing like morning. It was midnight in an empty house, thick, airless, echoing with things unsaid. The next morning he left before sunrise. No goodbye kiss, no note beside my coffee mug, just the slamming of the front door and the metallic cough of his engine. I wandered the rooms I had painted with bare feet and borrowed hope. My voice tried to practice explanations in the hallway mirror. "You know I'd never steal from your family, Ethan. You know me." But the glass only showed a woman in yesterday's navy dress. Mascara dried like smoke beneath her eyes. By noon my phone chirped with alerts. Joint checking, password changed, secondary card holder removed, wire transfer denied. I stared. Breath stalled, while the jasmine vines beyond the kitchen window rattled in a dry wind, petals browned and falling. That evening he stepped inside as though nothing had happened, hung his suit jacket with surgical precision, and without meeting my gaze, asked for the mail. When I offered a stack of envelopes, he sifted through until he found a bank statement addressed to both of us. "Funny," he murmured, "you've been busy." "Busy?" I echoed. He laid the statement flat on the dining table oak I had sanded myself, the varnish still smelling faintly of orange oil, and tapped a highlighted withdrawal. "Care to explain this missing 5,000 from Dad's estate account?" My pulse lurched. I've never had access to that account. That's not what Mom says. He spoke the word mom like it was irrefutable scripture. "I paid your father's neurologist once months ago, with my card, not his." He didn't argue. He simply left the room, and the dripping began. Day after day, small insinuations, receipts, went missing from the binder in my desk. My car keys vanished, reappeared in the washing machine lint tray like a silent scold for forgetfulness. He changed Wi-Fi passwords, reset smart lock codes. Each act was too small to name abuse, yet together, they formed a harness tightening around my ribs. A week later I found him sitting in the dark living room, glow of his laptop illuminating the sharp line of his jaw. He didn't look up. "I filed today." My throat closed. "For what?" But I knew. Separation. He clicked, clicked, clicked. "Mom's lawyer rushed the papers. I'll send them over email. Sign, scan, return." I stood at the doorway, one hand on the frame to steady myself. "Ethan, we can talk." He raised a palm, still not turning. "Pack what you came with. Claire, it's only fair." The cursor on his screen blinked like a metronome counting down the life I had built stitch by stitch. A single jasmine petal had blown inside and now lay at his feet, white against the rug's charcoal weave. He didn't notice when it stuck to his shoe as he walked past me up the stairs. That night the house seemed to grow larger, its shadows longer. I crawled into the closet off the master bedroom, the little cedar-lined space I had once filled with sundresses and laughter, and folded myself between garment bags, breathing cedar dust and perfume ghosts, a panic attack crested. Heartbeat a runaway horse. Vision tunneling. I pressed my wedding ring, plain white gold, simple by design, hard against my sternum, grounding myself on the cold certainty of metal. In sickness and in health echoed uselessly. I don't know how long I stayed in that dark cradle, but when I emerged, dawn was leaking peach light through the blinds. I caught my reflection in the cheval mirror, eyes hollow, hair matted, navy dress wrinkled like a shed skin. I looked like a woman haunting her own life. I willed myself to function, made tea I could not taste, showered until the water ran cold. Then I opened the small office we once shared, determined to retrieve tax records before he could twist them into poison. Drawers yawned half empty, files displaced, labels peeled. My fingertips burned with the dread of erasure. But buried beneath mismatched utilities and warranty manuals, I found a thin accordion folder I hadn't touched in months. Medical. Mr. Charles Whitmore scrawled in my handwriting. Ethan's father. Inside were receipts. Home care invoices stamped paid by C. Whitmore trustee Claire M. Email printouts from physicians praising my diligence. And tucked into the final pocket, a small ivory envelope sealed with wax the color of dried blood. My hands shook as I broke the seal. Charles's penmanship slanted, frail yet deliberate. Dearest Claire, the world will forget the quiet things you've done for me, but I cannot. If my son ever doubts your heart, show him this letter and remind him I chose you as the guardian of my mind when my own memories failed. With gratitude that cannot be measured, Charles. Ink blotches where the pen had paused, tremored. Tears blurred the lines, but relief, thin, sharp, undeniable, sliced through despair. I was not crazy. I was not a thief. I spread the documents across the floor like puzzle pieces catching morning light. Pages fluttered in the ceiling fan breeze, almost eager. The binder clip from the jasmine seed packet on my desk, the one I never had time to plant, became a clamp securing the evidence together. For the first time in weeks, my lungs filled fully. The room smelled of paper and cedar and the faint note of my unused perfume drifting from an open drawer, reclaiming space. A thought surfaced, calm as an ocean swell. He doesn't get to edit me out. I gathered every scrap of proof, slid them into a fresh manila envelope, the twin of the one that had spilled on his mother's carpet, then traced my finger along its edge like a promise. Outside, the vines on the porch shivered, casting dappled shadows against the front door. Some blossoms were still alive. Beneath the wilt, green persisted. I wasn't leaving empty-handed. I was leaving armed with truth, and the silence between us? It was still there, but it no longer suffocated. It had become a space I could grow inside, wide enough to stretch my limbs, to plan my next breath, my next life. I didn't leave a note. I didn't tell Ethan I was going. I just left. The manila envelope rode in the passenger seat like a silent companion. Everything else, clothes, books, toothbrush, fit in the trunk of my old sedan. I drove with no music, just the sound of tires against asphalt and the kind of silence that doesn't choke, but soothes. It was Maddie's idea. Her Aunt Lillian had a cottage outside Renwood, about an hour and a half from the city. Empty, quiet, almost forgotten. It's got creaky floors and no Wi-Fi, Maddie warned, but it's safe. You can breathe there. That was all I needed. The cottage sat on a gravel road lined with pale birch trees, their bark peeling like old parchment. The house was small, white with faded green shutters and a porch swing that swayed on its own when the wind passed through. I parked in the shade and stared for a long while, afraid to open the door. Not of what was inside, but of what I would have to face without distraction. Myself, inside, smelled of lavender and cedar, with dust motes dancing in the beams of late afternoon light. The bed was made. A chipped mug sat by the sink. A blanket, folded on the couch, had a single gray hair woven into the fibers, a stranger's comfort. Left behind, I unpacked in silence, placing the envelope in the kitchen drawer next to some forgotten matchbooks and a rusted corkscrew. That was the last. I looked at it for a long time. The first few days were strange, not painful, not peaceful, just still. I woke at sunrise without an alarm, watched the light move across the wooden floorboards as if time itself had slowed to a crawl. I made coffee with too much sugar. I stared out the window. I watered the patchy garden and pulled weeds until my hands blistered. I didn't cry, but I didn't smile either. The silence was thick, but not hostile. More like a room where no one speaks because the weight of noise might crack something fragile. I started writing again, not emails or to-do lists, but pages in a spiral-bound notebook. At first, it was just facts. My name is Claire Whitmore. I am 38 years old. My favorite flower is white jasmine. I once painted a whole hallway in one afternoon. Eventually, the facts became thoughts, then confessions, then memories, then color. I remembered who I was before him. Her name was Evelyn, late 60s, soft eyes, hair like wind-blown silver. I first noticed her peeking from behind a lilac bush with a pair of gardening gloves and a straw hat. She knocked on the side gate one afternoon, holding a mason jar of peach jam and a smile that didn't push. "You're Maddie's friend," she said. I knew her mother. "You've got her eyes." I almost told her I wasn't in the mood for company. But something in her voice, the way it curved around kindness like a soft quilt, made me nod. "I'm Claire," I said. "Just resting a while." "That's allowed, you know," she replied. "To rest, especially after surviving a storm." We sat on the porch. She didn't ask questions, just offered quiet conversation about plants and weather and the way the light shifted on the hills at dusk. Later, she left with a parting line: "If you ever want to learn how to grow tomatoes, I'm 2 fences over." No pressure. It felt like an invitation to be a person again, not a ghost. By the second week, I started tending the garden with purpose. I trimmed dead vines, planted new seedlings Evelyn had left at the gate in brown paper bags. Basil, lavender, sweet peas. There was something humbling about watching new things grow, not quickly, not urgently, just becoming in their own time. I hung laundry outside even though I had a dryer. I liked the way it smelled, that clean, sun-kissed scent you can't bottle. I painted one of the porch chairs sky blue. I reread books I once loved, underlining passages like rediscovering old friends. One day, Evelyn brought over a canvas and a box of paints. "I hear you used to make things," she said. I hadn't told her that. But maybe kindness knows things instinctively. I began to paint again, not portraits, not perfection, just feeling, soft landscapes, abstract streaks of grief and grace. I dipped the brush in indigo and thought of the navy dress I left behind. I painted gold lines like cracks in porcelain. I called one piece Silence, but whole. It came weeks later, unexpectedly. I was trying to install a clothesline pulley and nearly toppled into a bush. Evelyn caught me mid-fall, and we both burst into laughter. Not polite chuckles, real, gasping, belly-deep joy. It caught me by surprise, like sneezing in the sun. I hadn't laughed like that in years, not since before Ethan. That night, I stood by the kitchen window, tea in hand, watching the stars bleed across the sky. And I thought, I'm okay, not healed, not whole, but okay. I hadn't checked my phone in a week. I hadn't thought about proving anything to anyone in days. I wore my wedding ring on a chain around my neck. At first, it felt like armor, a reminder that I had endured. But now, it felt heavy. One morning, I took it off the chain and placed it in the garden soil beneath the lavender. Buried it with a single deep breath. A ritual, not of hate, but of release. Some roots must be cut for new things to grow. The cottage on Hollow Birch Road didn't fix me. It didn't erase the betrayal or rewrite the past, but it gave me space to hurt, to breathe, to remember myself, not as someone discarded, but as someone worth returning to. And that, I realized, was enough, more than enough. The weeks melted into one another like candle wax. Days softened at the edges. My hands stopped trembling when I poured tea. I no longer flinched at the sound of gravel outside the gate. I had created a rhythm, slow, steady, nourishing. The mornings belonged to the garden, afternoons to my work, remote consulting for a small nonprofit that helped women navigate financial abuse. Evenings were for reading, painting, walking barefoot through damp grass under silver moonlight. The woman who had once walked on eggshells now walked with bare feet and didn't apologize for the dirt. One morning, Evelyn dropped off a bushel of early pears. She found me on the porch, knees dirt-streaked, sun warm on my back. "You've come back to yourself," she said, watching me sip tea. I smiled. "I think I'm still arriving." She nodded. "But you left the door unlocked. That counts." It came on a Wednesday, brittle, gray-skied and whispering of rain. I was sorting old receipts for a grant application when my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Claire Whitmore?" a male voice asked. "Yes? My name is Thomas Greer. I'm calling on behalf of the Whitmore family estate." I'm Sorry to inform you that Charles Whitmore passed last night in his sleep. I froze. Not because I hadn't expected it. I had seen the signs last time I visited. His memory slipping like wet leaves. His hands always trembling. But still, the news carved something open. I understand, I said softly. There's more. The man continued. Mr. Whitmore left behind a sealed letter. For you specifically, and an amendment to his trust. He named you as a personal beneficiary. My breath caught. He requested it be hand-delivered. 2 days later, a courier handed me a slim cream envelope with my name written in Charles's neat, slanted script. The same hand that once scribbled crosswords in the morning paper. I sat with it for a long time at the kitchen table, the scent of rosemary from the windowsill plant curling around the silence. When I finally opened it, my hands were steady. Dear Claire, if you're reading this, I've slipped past the veil and I pray it was gently. I want to say what I should have said in person. You saved my life. Not just my mind, but my dignity. When I was confused, it was your voice I trusted. When I forgot names, it was your hand that steadied mine. You gave more than anyone asked of you. And I saw what that cost you. I know my son is limited in ways that pain me. And I suspect that my wife's shadow has stretched too far over his judgment. So I've left this letter, and a portion of my estate, in your name, not just out of gratitude, but as record. You mattered, Claire, to me, to this family. Whether they acknowledge it or not, use this however you choose. Rebuild, disappear, stand tall. But no, I saw you, and I thank you. Charles' tears didn't fall. Not immediately. The grief was warm, not sharp, the kind that holds your face in its hands and says, you are not crazy. I read the letter 3 times. Then I reached into the drawer, pulled out the original manila envelope, now growing heavier with truth, and added this new one beside it. I wasn't angry. Not in the way I used to be. Rage had scorched through me already, back when I was still begging for crumbs of understanding from people who refused to see me. What I felt now was precision, a sense of balance needing to be restored, not to hurt Ethan, but to release myself from the twisted narrative they'd built around me. I gathered the evidence, carefully, lovingly, the documents, the care invoices, the emails from Charles's doctors, the trust statement, the signed letter. I organized it all in a fresh accordion folder, not for confrontation but confirmation. Then I bought a new dress. It wasn't for him, not for his mother. It was for me. Midnight green, long sleeves, soft satin, a shade somewhere between calm and storm. I looked in the mirror that evening and didn't recognize the woman, and that was a good thing. And no mascara, no apology, just clean skin, steady breath, and quiet resolve. I didn't wear the ring. I wore the jasmine perfume again, the one his mother always said gave her headaches. That morning, I packed the envelope and a spare pair of shoes, and I drove. The Whitmore house looked exactly the same. Pristine hedges, shiny brass knocker, curtains drawn like a stage about to lift. A few cars lined the driveway. Family, no doubt. Probably a memorial gathering. The kind where everyone talks too softly and avoids the truth like it's a spill they're hoping someone else will mop up. I walked up the steps with the envelope pressed flat against my chest, like armor. Ethan opened the door, his face part surprise, part caution, part regret. Claire, I nodded politely. I won't stay long. He moved aside without a word. Inside, the house smelled like polished wood and regret. His mother appeared from the hallway, grayer now, but no less composed. Her eyes raked me up and down. You have a lot of nerve. No, I said gently. I have a lot of truth. When the lawyer arrived to read the statement of trust, I sat quietly in the back. I didn't speak. I didn't flinch. Ethan stood with his arms crossed, his mother perched like a hawk. When Charles's letter was introduced confirming my inheritance and his gratitude, the room shifted. Gasps, murmurs, a stunned silence. I stepped forward, slowly, deliberately. I never wanted his money. I said softly, just the truth. This letter, these documents. I held up the envelope. They're not vengeance, they're vindication. His mother's face paled, her jaw tightened. Ethan started to speak. Claire, I didn't know, but I raised a hand. I'm not here to make you understand. I'm here to stop needing you to. I left the house that day not as someone cast out, but as someone who walked away on her own feet, by her own choice. The folder never made it to a courtroom. It didn't have to. Truth doesn't need to shout. Sometimes it only needs to be held. Back at the cottage, I buried the letter beside the jasmine I had planted anew. A different vine, a stronger one. It took root quickly, flourished. The garden was blooming again, and so was I. I didn't intend to return to that house again, not ever. But when the memorial invitation arrived, cream cardstock, thick and self-important, stamped with the Whitmore family crest, I placed it on the kitchen table and stared at it for a long time. It wasn't grief that pulled me back. It was something quieter. A sense of responsibility to the man who had seen me, even in his final fading days, and a need, perhaps, to witness the end of something, not just his life, but a version of mine. The Whitmore estate was just as I'd remembered. Immaculate hedges, a driveway of crushed stone that hissed beneath my tires, and a silence so orchestrated it felt like theater. I stepped out of the car wearing the midnight green dress again, not because it made me feel powerful, but because it reminded me who I had become since the unraveling. I wore my hair loose. The jasmine perfume, bold, sweet, defiant, trailed in the wind behind me. The manila envelope, weathered now and soft at the corners, was tucked into my leather bag. Its weight was familiar. Comfortable even. I rang the bell with steady hands. Ethan opened the door. He looked thinner, paler, or maybe I had just grown into someone who no longer saw him as monumental. "Claire," he said, his voice just above a whisper. "I wasn't sure if you'd come." "I wasn't either," I replied. He stepped back, letting me in. The hallway smelled like lemon polish and dying flowers. Inside, the guests were gathered, all in blacks and grays, pearls and pocket squares. They sipped wine like it was permission to speak softly. I scanned the room. Faces turned, eyes flicked away, and then I saw her. Ethan's mother stood by the fireplace, a crystal glass in hand, her smile razor thin. "Well," she said, raising her eyebrows, "you do know how to make an entrance." I didn't reply. "Did you come for the inheritance?" she continued, voice dripping with condescension. "Or just to haunt the family one last time?" "I came to listen," I said calmly, "and to finish a story that wasn't mine to start but is mine to close." She opened her mouth again, but the lawyer, Mr. Greer, entered the room and cleared his throat. "Shall we begin?" he asked. Chairs were drawn into a semicircle. Mr. Greer stood before the hearth, glasses slipping low on his nose, folder open. In his hands, he read the standard formalities: the house, the cars, the investments, each name called, each heir nodding, and then he paused. Charles Whitmore left a separate letter of addendum, signed and witnessed, 3 months before his death. It concerns a personal bequest to Claire Whitmore. The room stiffened. I didn't move. Mr. Greer continued, "In acknowledgement of her care, stewardship, and moral integrity during my illness, and for being the only member of this family to look me in the eye when I forgot my own name, I leave to Claire Whitmore the cabin property in Blue Hill, the trust totaling $420,000, and the accompanying letter filed with this will." Gasps. A crystal glass clinked too hard against a tray. Ethan's mother rose from her chair. "This is absurd. This must be forged." "It's not," Mr. Greer said, unflinching. "I notarized the letter myself." She turned to me, voice rising. "You manipulated him. You preyed on his condition." This grift." "No," I said quietly, opening my bag, and just like that night at her table, it happened again. The bag tipped. The envelope slipped, its contents neatly tabbed, color-coded, time-stamped, spilled like truth across the floor. Care invoices, medical correspondence, emails from Charles himself, thank you cards written in shaky hand, but most damning of all, the original letter. The one sealed in wax. Ethan's mother stopped mid-breath. She knew that wax. We all did. I didn't say a word. I just gathered the papers again, slowly, deliberately, and handed them to Mr. Greer. "You may add these to the record," I said. He nodded, eyes wide with the kind of respect that doesn't need explaining. Ethan looked like he'd been winded, his voice cracked. "Claire, I didn't know. Mom told me. I looked at him, really looked. He had always seemed tall, decisive, enviable. But now I saw a man crumpling beneath the weight of his own cowardice. A boy who let others narrate his life for him. "I don't need your apology," I said, voice soft but unwavering. "And you don't need to explain." "Then why are you here?" he asked. "To stop needing any of this," I said, motioning to the room, the people, the ghosts. "I came for closure, and I found it. I left before dessert. No goodbyes. No dramatics. Just one final look around the room where my character had been rewritten, erased, and now restored. As I walked out the front door, the wind picked up. A single jasmine petal from a distant bush floated down onto the steps. I smiled. Back at the cottage, the sky was painted in hues of lavender and peach. The garden was wild and blooming, alive in a way that only things left alone can become. I sat on the porch, feet bare, a cup of mint tea warming my hands. Birds darted between the birch trees. A pair of wrens nested in the eaves. Evelyn had left a bouquet of sunflowers on my chair with a note that said simply, "Welcome home." I didn't answer emails that evening. I didn't open the envelope again. I didn't need to. The story was finished, not erased, but rewritten by me. And as the light faded and the night settled, I whispered a single sentence into the breeze. Not for them. Not for closure. For me. He thought I came with nothing, but I left with everything he could never take. My name, my peace, and the truth.